Everyone thinks Rome was born from a wolf, but Rome was built on cattle. Long before legions marched across Europe, before emperors ruled the Mediterranean, Rome was a fragile settlement surrounded by grazing land. And if you really want to understand how Rome conquered the world, you have to start in a pasture. Early Rome wasn't marble and monuments. It was mud, timber, and livestock. In the hills along the Tiber River, wealth wasn't measured in gold. It was measured in herds. Cattle meant food. Milk, leather, trade, dowries, status. Lose your herd and you didn't just lose property, you lost survival. Raids between neighboring communities were common, and stealing livestock wasn't petty theft. It was a direct attack on a family's future. Before Rome was a military power, it was a pastoral one. And that vulnerability shaped everything that followed. The Latin word for money, pecunia, comes from pecus, meaning livestock. That's not poetic coincidence, it's economic reality. In early Rome, wealth wasn't abstract, it grazed. Your position in society depended on how much land you owned and how many animals you could sustain on it. Property determined status, status determined political voice, and property was measured in herds. Cattle weren't just economic assets, they were the foundation of power. Around 450 BC, Rome inscribed its first formal legal code, the 12 Tables. These laws didn't just punish violent crimes, they carefully regulated livestock and land. If someone stole your cattle, penalties were severe. If your animals damaged a neighbor's crops, you were liable. If disputes arose over property boundaries, the law intervened. This wasn't accidental. The early Roman state understood something critical. Without protecting agricultural stability, there would be no stability at all. Before Rome protected citizens, it protected pasture. Long before Rome became a city, the hills along the Tiber were a practical meeting ground for pastoral families. The river formed one of the few natural crossing points in central Italy, and just upstream lay the Tiber Island, a rare spot where herds could be driven across more safely. Surrounding the Palatine and Capitoline hills were grazing lands and access routes linking inland pastoral communities to coastal salt supplies at the mouth of the Tiber. Salt was essential for preserving meat and sustaining livestock, and trade routes moving salt inland, later remembered as the Via Salaria, likely passed near this crossing. Families bringing cattle to pasture and trade would gather at this defensible river ford, exchanging animals, arranging marriages, negotiating grazing rights, and settling disputes. What began as a strategic pasture crossroads gradually required permanent oversight, storage, and protection. Seasonal encampments became clustered huts. Clustered huts required shared rules, and over time, a livestock meeting point at a river crossing consolidated into a permanent settlement, the nucleus of what would become Rome. As Rome grew, property ownership became directly tied to military obligation. Under the Servian reforms, Roman citizens were divided into classes based on wealth, and wealth meant land and livestock. The more property you had, the more heavily armed you were expected to be. Military service wasn't professional. It was civic duty tied to agricultural status. Rome's early army wasn't a standing force. It was farmers defending their own land. And that matters, because it meant Rome's military strength came from a broad base of landowning citizens, citizens who had something to protect. Cattle provided more than status, they provided surplus. Surplus allowed population growth. Population growth allowed larger armies. Larger armies allowed expansion. When Rome began conquering neighboring territories, it wasn't just seizing land for glory, it was securing more agricultural stability, more grazing fields, more farmland, more resources to sustain citizens who could fight. This is why Rome could absorb catastrophic losses. After defeats that would have ended smaller states, Rome endured, because its power wasn't concentrated in a royal treasury. It was distributed across landowning families. Its strength grazed in fields. Even as Rome expanded, its cultural identity remained rooted in agriculture. The ideal Roman wasn't a decadent aristocrat, it was the farmer-soldier. Take Cincinnatus, a man called from his farm to lead Rome in crisis. After victory, he returned to his plow. That story mattered because it reflected Roman values: discipline, simplicity, land ownership, responsibility. The Roman Republic saw virtue in rural life. Cattle symbolized order, and order created empire. Ironically, as Rome conquered more land, its agrarian balance began to break. Large estates, a lot of fun to replace small farms. Wealth concentrated. The farmer-soldier declined. And with that shift, the republic destabilized. The same agricultural foundation that built Rome also shaped the tensions that would eventually transform it. But none of that would have been possible without those early centuries of pasture-based stability. So when we picture Rome's founding, we imagine a wolf in the wilderness. But the real animal that built Rome was far less dramatic. It was cattle. Because before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, before it marched across continents, before it called itself eternal, it learned how to protect its herds. And from that pasture, an empire grew.